Alright guys, so as you can see, we've done quite a bit of work here to our scene. We have these mountains in the background, and I've just added some of these little layers right here, just to add a little bit of, break up to the terrain, and we're going to keep working on that. But what I want to do quick is introduce some trees into our scene here. And I have just this little tree pack. It was free on the Unreal Engine Marketplace. I've imported into my scene here, and we're just going to take some of these assets and drag them out. So you can see they look like pretty nice pine trees here, and obviously we have some weird stuff going on with the shadows, and I believe that's just due to the wind. We can look into our materials here, and I'll probably go into this one first. And if we go down here and we can take a look at our wind settings, yeah, so we can just turn them off. That'll give us no wind if we do want to have a little bit of wind. Honestly, I'm not really liking the look of that wind, so I think we'll just turn it off for now, and I'll go ahead and save that. And we can duplicate this and move it around here in our scene, put it back here next to this our building. If we take a look at our reference here, you can see we have this one big tree, we have a bunch of smaller trees and plants down here, and a big tree over here, and a bunch of other trees and stuff. So we can just start kind of populating our scene with this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm probably actually going to go over here into our foliage mode, and we'll take this tree and drop it in here into our foliage. This one looks pretty good as well, so maybe we'll drop that in. This one doesn't look bad, so maybe I'll add one of these in here. We can always delete them later. A couple others, maybe we'll grab this one and this one as well. And we're just going to have to wait for some of these shaders to compile for some of these objects. If you want to use the foliage, what you want to do is take your assets like we have here, just drag them over. Now if you're using Quixel Megascans for your foliage, it'll probably already import into here. If you're using something like a plant or things like that, they'll probably already be imported because they automatically import as foliage if you're using something of that nature. But if you have any sort of asset, you can just drag it right into your foliage here, and it'll automatically enable. But well, the way foliage works is you have a paintbrush here, and you can paint your foliage into your scene. So I'm just going to make this smaller here so we can see our scene. You see we have this little circle. We can move that around our scene and paint objects onto our landscape. You can also paint it onto the sides of your buildings, whatever. Basically, that's how it works. And you have your brush size and density up here, so you can turn up your size. So we have a huge size, and the density controls the strength of your brush. Your density down here and the density up here work together, so they basically multiply. So the density that you have set here for your brush is going to multiply by the density that you have down here. So what I'll probably do is turn this to something like 5, and this can kind of be trial and error because it also depends on the size of your scene. So what you can do here is if you click on a piece of foliage, it will show up in your editor here. And what you can do is you can edit the scale. So you have a bunch of settings here. So we have our placement settings. So you can turn up your Z offset. That's just going to be how high it is offset from the plane or the mesh that you're painting it onto. So you can, have things floating or, go beneath the surface if you want. If you want to have some intersection there for some better blending. And you can either align to normal or not. So if you align it to the normal, if it's a tree, for example, it's always going to stick up straight and down like this tree. If you don't have it aligned to the normal, it could be kind of rotated in a weird way or sideways, whatever, based on your rotation settings. So if you go up here to scaling, that's another important thing. You can have your minimum scale and your maximum scale, and that's going to be based on the scale of your object initially. So if you just drag this mesh out here, that would be a scale of 1, and you can obviously set this up, really high if you want to. And depending on the size of your scene, you might want to set it higher or a little bit lower. Or you can edit the settings for multiple foliage instances or meshes at one time, and you do that by clicking the first one. Click the first one, so it shows that it's selected because it's outlined in yellow, and you hold Shift and click the last one, and it'll select all of your foliage meshes. And then you can edit them all at the same time down here. So you see it says multiple values. That's because I've edited one of them. But you can have the same settings. So if you want to set up your basic foliage settings, if we want to edit the foliage meshes that are similar so that they all have similar scale values, we can click one here, control click, and now we can just edit these 3 meshes here, our scaling and placement settings. And then we can go into these and do them separately. We can edit them individually after that as well. So if you want to, you can get as detailed as you like with this. Probably what I'm going to do is take all of them at the same time, and we're just going to set this down to like maybe 5. We're going to try it out and see what happens. And the radius here is our minimum distance between foliage instances, as you can see here. So I might set this to like 3, just so we have some space in between our instances. And now for scaling, I'm probably going to set the minimum to like 0.3, and I'm probably going to set the maximum to like 0.7. We don't really need any Z offset, I don't think, because we're just going to have our trees kind of sticking out of the ground. We'll keep the random yaw turned on. And the random yaw essentially just means that it'll be rotated around the Z axis. So vertically, it will have different values for the rotation around the Z axis. So that'll just give some randomness into your scene. And so we mostly want to have our trees over here. I'm just going to go ahead and start kind of painting. And as you can see, we already have like a whole forest here. It's probably a little bit much for what we want to do. But as you can see, we can really quickly get some pretty good results here. And it's really filling in our scene a lot. So I'm going to undo that, obviously. But so we're going to reduce the density significantly to like maybe 1. And we're going to also go down here and take the minimum down to like 0.2 and maximum up to like 0.9. Okay, so we'll just have a little bit more disparity in our randomness of the size of our trees. And something like that is actually pretty good. I'm going to undo this, though, and decrease our size a little bit, so you have a little more control. Now if we take a look here, that's looking pretty good. So I'd like a little bit more randomness. I think these trees need to be a little bit bigger. So if we take a look at our reference, we're coming up like maybe almost a quarter of the way up our building here for our biggest tree. So having these trees pretty small works well, but we're going to have a couple outliers here. A lot of this is just going to be playing with your settings until you get something that you like. Obviously, you can place these manually, which I'll probably end up doing for the main trees, but this is a good way to just get a little bit of randomness, and you don't have to do as much work. It's more just tweaking the settings, which is nice. So I'm going to bring this down to like 0.05. 1.2 and 0.8. So let's try this. And something like this is looking pretty good. So now if we go back to our Cine Camera Actor, something like that is looking pretty good. However, I would like a little bit more, just randomness. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete a lot of these. So if you want to select all the instances of a mesh, we can right click on it here and select all instances. And I'm just going to delete those, and we'll click yes because those are really tiny. And we'll go and delete some of these because they look ridiculous. That's starting to look much better. And we can fill in some of the spaces here with some of these other foliage pieces. We can still move over here, and we can paint a few more trees over on this side. There we go. So that's really starting to fill in our scene quite nicely. And if we take a look at our reference here, we're starting to get this kind of look going that we want. What we can start doing is just kind of going in and deleting some of these as we want. I kind of find this to be a good workflow where, we add a bunch of things into our scene and then just kind of delete them as we see fit. That gives us a little bit, we're just removing things instead of duplicating and having a million copies of different things in our scene. So Scale these up and down as we need. Once again, we're adding a lot of detail to our scene. So these trees, they're blowing in the wind. That's going to give us like a lot more detail for our eyes to work with in this scene, and it's going to give us a point of reference for scale. Now we have much more realistic looking scene.